Thanks for this warm welcome. Thanks for being here to talk about this topic that is strictly related to the times we're going through. So this is strictly related to the way we consume products, to our ways of living. So we're going to talk about startup and sharing economy. So which are the real opportunities that are there today? So some people talk about sort of peer-to-peer sort of methodologies. Others talk about sort of sharing economy. So there are different new terms, but the sharing economy is becoming a new paradigm, and specifically, other things are changing. We are moving, we are shifting from the sort of era of owning to the era of sharing. And maybe some of you have come here through car sharing solutions, carpooling solutions. Maybe you use BlaBlaCar as a service, or you know that there are new phenomena today like Airbnb, one of the largest world network of sort of private housing. Then there are other major sort of websites that manage sort of new forms of room renting. The same holds true for parking lots, foodstuffs, clothing, consulting services, hotel rooms, and more and more new kinds of products and services. So digital technologies are becoming a new access gateway. It's not a case if between 2008 and 2010, some of the major sharing successes sort of sowed the day during that period, so over the last few years. But then when it comes to the new forms of sharing economy, well, this is strictly related to the booming of new technologies and digital solutions. So sharing becomes more important than owning. So initially, we have 13% of the population that has been using over the last year a new sharing economy service or somehow is related to sharing economy. In other countries where digital technologies are much more widespread and where these tools are much more used and developed, like in the US, 55.3% of the population has been using over the last year sharing economy tools, and 63% of the population in the UK has been using those tools. So these are figures that tell us a lot and raise new questions and topics. We have Andrea Contri here as a guest. Thanks for coming. Innovation Manager of the Intesa Sanpaolo Innovation Center, and is the coordinator of the startup initiative that tries to promote the sort of meet between supply and demand in this sector. So Andrea, please let us better understand this new concept of sharing economy. Please let us better understand what it's all about. So please, can you tell us about the origins of this sharing economy concept and the new perspective for the future? So, well, thanks for inviting me here today, and I would like to say something more about Goodwin, who is the person in charge of Havas, who said that in 2015, Uber has no vehicles. Facebook, the most important media company, doesn't create contents, and Airbnb doesn't own a single building. So something interesting is going on. So again, let's see what's exactly this something industry which is going on. So this is about sharing something that people do not own sort of completely, but getting some gain from that. But this is not the essence of all that. And there are several examples. So from the fact of having a room and renting it through Airbnb, so becoming like a small-scale hotel owner and offering a hospitality solution to a stranger, or it is about a car and sharing a car, moving from Uber to BlaBlaCar, asking for a lift and sharing the costs, and then down to other urban mobility solutions. But more than that, then there are stranger examples that are not published everywhere, and I'd like to mention that. There is Nyamo, an interesting startup from Turin, and this is about having guests, and these guests even pay for that. So it's a sort of new way of offering restoration services, like catering services. But sometimes when it comes to these new forms of startups, there are some legal and administrative constraints. But this is something so new that has to be faced. And in the US, you have Manchery. You can order from a chef or a person you know, and this person is going to take you home, I don't know, something you really like, a special dish or something else. And then this is about time sharing and service sharing. So there are digital marketplaces. You can sort of offer your services as translator or as painter or as a craftsman of some sort and get paid for that. But most of all, and I'm working for a bank, also money and the way of managing money and financing is sort of changing. So there is a peer-to-peer lending, so lending among private people. So there is no third party like bank, but people sort of lend each other money directly, and the digital platform simply helps people getting together. And we have a lending club in the US, but we have a Smartica in Italy, former Zopa, that is gaining ground. And then we have the crowdfunding. So the idea of trying to get funds to carry out your own project. You probably know Kickstart, which is the most recent example and the most famous one. And some Italian projects have been launched, so those who want to write a book or make a film or something else can ask for financing, not only to friends and relatives and dear ones, but also to a much larger public and audience. So maybe people sharing your passion can decide to support you financially and donate money to support your project, so that then you can carry out your project, and then these sort of people can feel good because they helped you make your dream come true. But this is something very new. And 10 years ago, that was not possible because digital technologies were not there. But today, thanks to the internet and the extreme connectivity we have today, we can do that. So we can sort of check out that every second things like a car you ordered or a dish you ordered or any other thing you ordered through digital tools. So digital solutions made it possible to have these greater sort of liquid tools. So liquid tools can be better used and enjoyed thanks to digital solutions and technologies. Another key element is trust, because all these exchanges happen and occur between and among people. So it's about getting strangers to your place, maybe to have a dinner or to have them spend the night at your place. And again, so this is something that is based on mutual trust. And again, this is also based on the feedback of the people that use your services. And this is another brand new thing, another brand new feature of this new phenomenon. And again, more than that, there is another aspect to be considered. This is about sharing experience between and among people. Of course, people do all these things for money. And for instance, I decided to rent a room in my house on Airbnb. And so I have people coming to my place to rent a room because they want to visit the expo or do other things in Milan. But this is much more than that. It's not simply about getting money, it's about establishing relationships. So people are sort of really moved by the desire to get to know new people and to get enriched, not only materially but also spiritually by this presence. Some days ago, I had some young guests and they forgot to get your luggage on time at the sort of luggage deposit, and they didn't have anything with them, and they came to my place, and I had the sort of people that had nothing with them. They didn't have a pajama, they didn't have a toothbrush, so I gave them what I could share with them. And so not only they could enjoy a brand new staying experience in Milan, but also getting some practical help. I mean, and again, I knew what they could feel because they didn't have anything with them because the luggage deposit had closed and they hadn't taken their sort of luggage on time. Again, these are new scenarios opened up by this new sharing economy. Of course, it's about using better and in a much more effective way everything we have, like our house, our car, our kitchen. So somehow these new sort of ways of consuming help us reduce the level of waste in terms of money, time, and resources. Another great advantage of this is that we can open up to new form of micro companies, because very often these people try to sort of use these sources of income as an additional source of income. Maybe you rent part of your home or some rooms of your home when you are on holiday, or maybe when there is a specific opportunity or occasion. So again, people can try to launch a new sort of micro business and maybe discover a new vocation. And again, it is also important to underscore to what extent these new forms of sort of business saw the day in very entrepreneurial countries like the UK. And moreover, these new sharing economy forms are also very much based on the idea of sharing experiences with people, so people can establish much closer relationships. And I would like to go back to the idea of the peer-to-peer lending. And this is Sanpaolo as Banca Prossima, a branch that deals with social companies. And they had a very smart idea, and I don't say just because I work for Banca Intesa, because thanks to a micro crowdfunding platform called Terzo Valore, people can support initiatives like cooperative companies like Cooperativa Cometa, and they can do it at an interest rate that is lower than the average market interest rate. So again, digital platforms get together people sharing the same dream and passion so that people can share a goal or a project. These are the advantages, but I don't want to sound as an sort of positive thinker that always think positive. Well, we should not hide also the potential drawbacks. There are three specifically. The first one is the major drawback related to legal and administrative rules, because these are new forms of sharing things, and this paradigm is brand new. So when laws, regulations, and directives were written at all levels, these things did not exist. So our laws are not suitable to sort of regulate these new forms of business. So we need a very quick and heavy regulating adaptation and a regulatory shift in order to allow these new forms of sharing economy being sort of properly regulated. And so this is a great challenge. Secondary element to be considered as a potential risk is the following. So sometimes these new ways of working may turn into precarious forms of work. So maybe people can turn to these activities simply because they do not have anything better to do, and so somehow they may be sort of forms of precarious work generated by these activities. So somehow these sort of ways of working cannot be properly protected. So it is important to understand, I mean, if people do it as a passion or as a compulsory source of income. The third aspect is the concentration of these services. We said that these new phenomena are possible only thanks to new digital tools, but we should not forget that there are just a few startups that have the necessary critical mass to manage this phenomena at national or international level. Then there are local sorts of businesses that make maybe also more specialized, but certainly greater players have a major advantage. So somehow the control of these sharing resources may be limited to the critical mass of the player being considered. So those who have an enough big size to offer a certain level of service can thrive, but all the others risk simply to struggle. So again, this is another potential drawback that needs to be considered. Thank you very much. And so you are a bank, Banca Intesa. So sometimes banks have gone through major changes, isn't it? And allow me to say that digital tools allow people to optimize their time. So again, banks are also analyzing new ways of interacting with their customers. And I know that there are several startup-related initiatives promoted by banks. So banks invest in venture capitals and decide to promote sometimes risky business because they consider those investments as risky. Could you please tell us more about these incentive programs related to startups?
Come Intesa Sanpaolo da diverso tempo facciamo iniziative legate all'innovazione all'interno delle varie business unit del gruppo. Per mia fortuna dal 2015 è nato l'Innovation Center, che è un po' il centro che raccoglie tutti questi progetti e iniziative su vari fronti e gli dà una visione organica e un mandato ampio rispetto a tutto il paese e a tutta la banca. Questo Innovation Center, che appunto è appena nato, raccoglie due missioni fondamentali. La prima è quella di scovare quali di queste innovazioni, quelle portate dalle start-up innovative, vanno a toccare il nostro business e quindi, come dicevamo prima, conoscere il crowdfunding, conoscere il prestito tra privati, sapere chi sono gli attori fondamentali, quali sono le tecnologie abilitanti, per portarle in casa, quindi per cambiare il modo con cui noi facciamo banca. Citavi l'esempio dell'online banking che in un certo senso disintermedia la nostra filiale, ma il nostro obiettivo non è di arrestare questo fenomeno, bensì di essere pronti quando una nuova generazione sarà tutta e solo in relazione con noi attraverso quel canale. E quindi il nostro scopo è un po' quello di stuzzicare i processi della banca a evolvere velocemente, anche acquisendo tecnologia e soluzioni che provengono dal mercato. La seconda missione fondamentale, che è quella che seguo un po' più da vicino io, è quella di aiutare le imprese e i nostri clienti a fruire di questa innovazione e quindi prendere le start-up che hanno sviluppato soluzioni adatte ad un settore o ad una tecnologia in particolare e metterle in contatto con le imprese che noi seguiamo che hanno bisogno di questo tipo di innovazione per essere competitive, per crescere. E quindi si va da progetti di open innovation a progetti di investimento diretto in startup. Noi disponiamo di un fondo di venture capital che ha attualmente 60 milioni in gestione, abbiamo una serie di progetti direttamente legati al finanziamento anche con forme di capitale di debito con il fondo di garanzia per le start-up che è una innovazione normativa, ma soprattutto dal 2009 gestiamo una iniziativa che si chiama Startup Initiative che permette alle start-up più interessanti che andiamo a scovare parlando con tutti gli attori dell'ecosistema di entrare in contatto rapidamente con il maggior numero possibile di investitori potenziali. Questi investitori sono poi di due tipi. Da un lato ci sono i fondi di venture capital e gli angel investor, cioè persone che di mestiere investono soldi propri o di altri in iniziative ad altissimo rischio e ad altissimo rendimento potenziale, che che sono quelli che rendono possibili questi salti evolutivi grazie all'innovazione portata dalle start-up. Dall'altro lato c'è il mondo delle imprese vere e proprie, quindi chi può finanziare una startup non sempre, non solo è chi gli dà il capitale di rischio, ma può essere il partner industriale, può essere la grande azienda che utilizza la tecnologia sviluppata dalla startup all'interno dei propri processi o dei propri prodotti. Per cui noi di fatto ormai 6 anni sono che lo facciamo, abbiamo fatto 80 eventi dedicati alle startup degli investment forum, dove mettiamo in contatto una decina di startup ogni volta con un centinaio di imprese e investitori. E queste startup le selezioniamo con un processo selettivo, formativo, in cui le accompagniamo in modo molto leggero, senza portarcele in casa come fanno certi incubatori che ti tengono lì per 3 mesi e ti danno un sacco di servizi di supporto. Noi non possiamo permettercelo, invece facciamo una cosa molto mirata, prendiamo quelle che sono già mature, che hanno già un'idea chiara, e le aiutiamo a comunicarsi nel modo più efficace possibile a chi li può aiutare a crescere, sia attraverso eventi, sia attraverso anche piattaforme digitali. Abbiamo lanciato proprio quest'estate una piattaforma che si chiama Tech Marketplace, dove le piccole e medie imprese possono venire a vedere che cosa fanno le start-up che noi abbiamo aiutato nel tempo e magari, perché no, diventarne clienti o diventare un giorno acquirenti della società in toto.
Complimenti. Grazie Andrea per averci spiegato bene il concetto di sharing economy, quello che state facendo, che il mondo bancario insomma sorprende, che siete così attivi, no, nel rispondere a questo cambiamento che viviamo quotidianamente. Abbiamo visto che una delle possibilità nell'utilizzo dell'economia di condivisione sia quello del trasporto, in particolare nel poter spostarsi in automobili senza avere l'automobile. E quindi Davide Ghezzi è il fondatore di LetzGo, è un servizio di carpooling urbano istantaneo. Siete partiti nel 2013. Raccontaci da dove nasce questa idea, no? Perché comunque in altre parti del mondo, citavamo prima, i numeri sono diversi, no? In Italia i numeri, insomma, il digital divide ha un impatto diverso. E quindi da dove nasce l'idea e qual è il sogno che state portando avanti? Di cosa si tratta?
Buonasera a tutti e grazie mille per questo invito. Vi racconto come nasce LetzGo e poi che cos'è LetzGo. LetzGo nasce da una grande frustrazione, che è la frustrazione di vedere sostanzialmente di vedere la mobilità urbana come assolutamente insostenibile nel mondo. Vi faccio vedere, ho portato non delle slide perché odio le slide, ma alcune foto che vi rendono molto bene l'idea, qualcuno le ha condivise su Facebook qualche giorno fa, tratte dal Washington Post. Scusate. Questa è una strada di Seattle, ci sono 200 persone dentro 177 macchine. Questi hanno fatto una sorta di simulazione in cui hanno fatto vedere le stesse persone senza le macchine, le stesse persone tutte in bicicletta, sempre 200 persone tutte in bicicletta, le stesse persone su 3 autobus e le stesse persone su una metropolitana leggera. E se ritorniamo alla prima immagine si vede subito che c'è qualcosa che non va nella mobilità urbana l'idea di LetzGo è nata proprio guardando queste macchine, non a Seattle ma in Viale Papignano a Milano, e vedere tutte queste macchine tutte vuote. A Milano la statistica del comune dice che l'89% delle automobili che girano a Milano hanno 4 posti liberi, quindi c'è solo una persona e quindi sono dei mezzi pesano da 800 a 2000 kg che si spostano senza la minima efficienza. Questo ho cominciato a guardarlo una decina d'anni fa, ma non c'era nessun modo per trovare una soluzione. Ho cominciato a pensare come si potesse fare qualcosa per questa cosa che mi dava veramente fastidio. Questo non potevo mettere delle persone in mezzo alla strada, su delle sedie, non mi interessa la bicicletta, la considero un mezzo assolutamente pericoloso, soprattutto a Milano, e gli autobus e le metropolitane sono, non è il mio lavoro. Allora ho cominciato a pensare, ma perché queste persone non possono, magari all'interno di queste 200 macchine, 177 macchine, ci sono delle persone che vorrebbero condividere la propria auto perché stanno andando nella mia stessa direzione. E questo ovviamente io non sapevo bene come si poteva fare. Poi è arrivato quello che diceva Andrea, è arrivata la tecnologia. La tecnologia ha reso possibile alle persone geolocalizzarsi e quindi sapere chi all'interno di queste auto era disponibile a dare un passaggio a un'altra persona, perché magari sapeva che stava andando nella stessa direzione. Quindi nel 2012 ho avuto questa idea, però era un po' strana ancora ai tempi, però l'ho presentata all'Expo a fine del 2012 e ho visto che proprio in quel momento era nata una società in America che faceva la stessa cosa e sono stato molto contento, ho detto cavolo, c'è qualcuno che ha avuto la stessa idea, non è un'utopia, no? Sono andato a San Francisco, ho conosciuto questi per proporgli di farlo insieme in Italia. Loro ovviamente stavano cominciando in America, quindi non avevano possibilità di farlo. Nel frattempo questa società che è partita nei fatti con noi è esplosa. Ci sono 2 o 3 società in America che fanno la stessa cosa che facciamo noi, si chiamano Lyft e Sidecar, e quindi sono tornato in Italia e ho cominciato a studiare questo tema, perché ovviamente tutta la sharing economy, come diceva Andrea, si naviga in una sorta di ambiguità, in un'area grigia, no? Perché sono delle tecnologie che non esistevano quando sono state fatte un sacco di leggi. Quindi ho studiato per più di un anno con un team di avvocati una struttura che permettesse di arrivare partecipare, ad entrare sul mercato in modo completamente protetto e legale. A fine del 2013 siamo partiti con un test e ad aprile siamo partiti a Milano con LetzGo e poi abbiamo aperto Torino, Genova e a settembre partiremo con Padova e con altre città italiane. Abbiamo più di 1500 driver tra le 3 città in cui siamo presenti. E la community cresce sempre di più e ogni giorno più o meno riceviamo delle richieste da parte di persone che vogliono aprire LetzGo nella propria città. Vi spiego in 2 parole che cos'è LetzGo. È quello che vedete, spostare la condivisione di questi posti in macchina, di modo che questa foto sia più simile a quella in cui ci sono solo le persone, che ci siano meno macchine in giro per la città. Quindi io sono in giro per la città, faccio parte della community di LetzGo, mi sono iscritto, voglio andare da Viale Papiniano alla stazione centrale di Milano e indico questo percorso. La comunità dei driver che è stata selezionata, noi chiediamo alcuni documenti ai driver per sicurezza. Se c'è qualcuno che sta andando nella stessa direzione risponde e ti dà un passaggio. Alla fine di questa condivisione di un passaggio succedono 2 cose. La prima è che c'è un rimborso dei costi del viaggio, noi diamo un'indicazione di questi costi, poi però è il passeggero che decide come si fa con gli amici. In questo senso è veramente una community, è il passeggero che decide quando lasciare, se lasciare di più dell'importo suggerito o di meno, liberamente. Il secondo punto è che la community il passeggero giudica il driver e il driver giudica il passeggero. Questo è un punto fondamentale per tutte le community della sharing economy, da Airbnb a tutte le altre. Quindi LetzGo poi il suo business prende una percentuale di qualunque rimborso sia lasciato dal passeggero al driver. Una cosa, ecco, nei prossimi mesi noi vogliamo espanderci in altre città e soprattutto aiutare la mobilità in posti in cui, al di là delle grandi città dove c'è già una massa critica, a Torino per esempio stiamo andando benissimo, aiutare anche la mobilità in quelle zone dove non ci sono per esempio mezzi di trasporto, dove in situazioni stagionali è difficile muoversi, come le zone di mare per esempio. Quindi andare oltre, diciamo, crescere sempre di più in Italia, andare oltre le grandi città o comunque restando sempre alla necessità di avere una massa critica. A fine anno scorso sono entrati, prima è stata finanziata dal sottoscritto, poi sono entrati degli investitori, adesso stiamo cercando, chiuderemo degli investimenti entro quest'anno per finanziare lo sviluppo ulteriore. Questa, diciamo, di questa frustrazione è il primo punto da cui il primo punto che mi ha spinto e ha spinto anche i ragazzi con cui lavoro a partire con LetzGo, quindi vedere delle risorse usate male. Poi ci sono altri due trend, due diciamo, cose che stanno cambiando nel mondo molto interessanti. Una è questa, che ci sono queste persone che sono quelle che fra pochi anni, già adesso stanno cominciando, ma fra pochi anni governeranno il mondo, sono i cosiddetti millennials. Queste persone sono sempre meno interessate a possedere, per esempio, delle automobili. In America, questi sono evidentemente dei ragazzi americani, però in America tra il 2007 e il 2011 la vendita di auto ai millennials, quindi persone tra dai 18 ai 35 anni più o meno, c'è anche una mostra al meeting sui millennials, ho visto tra l'altro, in America la percentuale il volume di auto vendute ai millennials è scesa del 30% in quel periodo, perché sono meno interessati di quanto lo fossimo noi di un'altra generazione ad avere un'auto. Io non vedo queste persone il sabato pomeriggio a lavare la macchina dal benzinaio. Sono più interessati ad avere un servizio, cioè a muoversi da un punto all'altro della città e poi lasciarla lì, anche perché c'è una consapevolezza diversa dell'ambiente, eccetera. Quindi i millennials poi sono anche, diciamo, sono anche questi, per essere più italiani. E il terzo punto fondamentale è quello che diceva Andrea. C'è un ritorno, come se fosse un ritorno della fiducia, cioè la tecnologia ha aiutato ad avere fiducia nelle persone e a valorizzare la fiducia. Quindi le community, per esempio, mi ricordo che una delle obiezioni che mi facevano agli inizi era: chi vuole ospitare in auto uno sconosciuto? No? Era la stessa obiezione che si faceva ad Airbnb: chi vuole, come ha fatto Andrea, ospitare dei perfetti sconosciuti nella propria casa, magari mentre ci dormi? Questo nel caso di Airbnb, per esempio, ci sono 150.000 alloggi in Italia e cresce del 100% all'anno, no? Quindi ci sono sempre più persone che ospitano degli sconosciuti. Perché lo fanno? Perché delle persone prima di loro hanno creato un circolo virtuoso in queste comunità, quindi gli ospiti che arrivano hanno già avuto dei feedback in precedenza, quindi chi ha dei feedback sempre più positivi poi avrà sempre più possibilità di essere ospitati e di ospitare e anche di guadagnare dei soldi come fanno qua. Quindi questo è un punto secondo me veramente importante, quello della fiducia, e parte secondo me dall'assunto proprio è come se fosse ritornata la possibilità di avere fiducia nel prossimo, valorizzando questa fiducia, cosa che andava contro anche l'idea che qualcuno potesse veramente farlo, anche e soprattutto tra gli italiani. L'idea della condivisione di una cosa così intima come la macchina non era così evidente.
Wow, quindi è straordinario, perché comunque tutti pensiamo, no, che la tecnologia sia tutti, anche io stesso, insomma, anche a casa mia con mia moglie, insomma, pensiamo che la tecnologia molte volte sia qualcosa di freddo, qualcosa di sicuramente completamente lontano dai nostri mondi, quindi virtuale. Invece, se le viviamo proprio in quelle direzioni come tecnologie abilitanti, come strumento che mi abilita a un incontro reale nell'utilizzo di un servizio, diventa qualcosa di veramente propositivo nel costruire nuove imprese. Tu hai parlato un po', no, un'avventura che stai percorrendo, no, nello sviluppo di una nuova impresa, un'avventura di grandissima responsabilità che hai nel guidare questa impresa. Penso che non sia tutto wow, tutto super, no, fare startup oggi. Se ci dici con due parole quali sono le difficoltà che incontri oggi, da cui probabilmente, se qualcuno vuole intraprendere, insomma, una nuova iniziativa, è importante, no, sottolineare quali sono le fatiche che fai, le difficoltà che oggi appunto nel fare startup da un lato. Dall'altro, il nostro paese. Io, come si dice, sono un misto argentino, sammarinense, italiano di recente.
I problemi e le difficoltà credo che per ogni imprenditore abbia, diciamo, per certi versi dorme bene di notte, per certi versi dorme male, quindi ci sono quotidianamente dei problemi a farlo anche in Italia e a costo di essere banale credo che il costo del lavoro e ancora l'inflessibilità nei contratti di lavoro sia per me la cosa più pesante. Però poi ci sono tanti problemi che tanti imprenditori italiani hanno e diciamo sono gli stessi nostri. Poi in più noi siamo in un settore, come dicevo prima, molto di una sorta di area grigia ancora e quindi il punto vero è quello di arrivare a un punto in cui ci siano delle regole chiare, perché il mondo è cambiato e bisogna seguire, adattarsi un po' a queste regole. Questo deve farlo innanzitutto la politica. E mentre pensavo a questo incontro, ho visto una presentazione che avevo fatto 2 anni fa, che è molto interessante su questo punto, su quanto inarrestabile è quello di cui stiamo parlando, di cui hanno parlato e parleremo. È molto interessante perché 2 anni fa, quando vi ho detto che erano partite 2 società che facevano esattamente questa cosa, queste hanno avuto esattamente gli stessi problemi, quindi di ride sharing, carpooling urbano, quello che stiamo facendo noi con LetzGo. Hanno avuto gli stessi problemi esatti in America, in California, uguali, quindi hanno avuto, questi sono degli articoli di giornale di 2 anni fa in cui si dice che Uber, Lyft, Sidecar sono stati bloccati, hanno avuto delle multe, non dovevano essere fermati. L'autorità, diciamo il comune, sia il comune che le varie associazioni di tassisti, il comune, l'autorità per i trasporti locale californiana. Cosa è successo? Che queste società hanno, la loro reazione è stata quella di muovere la loro community, quindi di far parlare le loro community, che questa è per esempio la community di Lyft, sono delle pagine Facebook di Lyft, che è il nostro omologo negli Stati Uniti, questa community ha cominciato a dire: ma scusate, noi abbiamo una persona che mi dà un passaggio in macchina, pago meno, non devo più possedere una macchina o 2, ma ne devo possedere solo una, è più ecologicamente sostenibile, ci sono una serie di benefici. Perché ci bloccate? Perché bloccate questi benefici? Rifate le regole. Hanno fatto delle petizioni poi nei fatti molto serie, come gli americani sanno fare, e nel corso dei mesi sono arrivati ad avere, la California ha cambiato completamente registro, e la California è stato, questo è un articolo di 2 anni fa esatti, ed è durato 1 anno questo processo, dall'inizio dello scontro fino a quando la California ha reso legale, non legale, ma ha regolato le attività di ride sharing. E da questo giorno della California hanno poi seguito tutti gli altri stati, il Colorado, e oggi è molto interessante perché non c'è un giorno in cui uno Stato americano o anglosassone, tendenzialmente anche in Europa, comunque non discuta o approvi una regolazione a favore del ride sharing. Questo perché? Probabilmente, io sono molto concreto, cioè questa è realpolitik, perché evidentemente c'erano più voti tra quelli tra le comunità che sostenevano queste nuove forme di mobilità di quanto ce ne fossero tra gli appartenenti ai mezzi di trasporto tradizionale, diciamo. E questo secondo me è molto interessante anche per un politico adesso. Quindi questo, diciamo, con questo voglio dire che ci sono delle cose, e qua vado anche alla domanda che mi hai fatto successiva, di quali consigli possiamo dare. Ci sono delle cose che sono inarrestabili, e il mondo è troppo globalizzato per non pensare che quello che succede in America ha un riscontro positivo di questo tipo, nel bene e nel male. Ci sono anche cose non positive, però che arrivino anche da noi a una velocità molto più veloce di quella a cui eravamo abituati. Quindi il primo consiglio è di guardare questi trend, andare anche in America, andare in California e vedere cosa stanno studiando da qui ai prossimi, come cambierà il mondo nei prossimi 10 anni, perché lì già lo sanno, e sono cose che arriveranno comunque da noi e che devono essere interpretate in chiave locale anche, come stiamo facendo noi con LetzGo. E per quanto riguarda l'Italia, io credo che invece riguardo alla nostra situazione, credo che proprio per il fatto che credo in Italia ci sono tantissime opportunità e ci sono tantissime opportunità proprio per il fatto che nessuno pensa che ci siano delle opportunità, cioè che ci sia un pensiero comune in cui in Italia è troppo difficile fare le cose, eccetera, eccetera. Questo, ecco, chi ha un occhio positivo, una mentalità positiva e non si arrende, secondo me ha un vantaggio competitivo rispetto a tutti gli altri imprenditori italiani. E poi un altro consiglio senz'altro è appunto di essere locali, di cercare di andare avanti stando, come abbiamo cercato di fare noi, all'interno di tutte le leggi. Nel nostro caso ci siamo ispirati alla normativa europea, che non è una normativa, sono delle linee guida in Europa per essere legali, per operare in modo legale, però diciamo seguire quello, però le regole vanno anche un po' spostate in avanti, altrimenti non andiamo da nessuna parte, quindi cercare di non aver paura nello spostare le regole un filo più avanti.
Sì, questo ti ringrazio per l'intervento, perché sono sicuramente consigli diretti dalla tua esperienza, è un po' quello che viviamo qua oggi al meeting. Qualche amico, Marinucci, Marco, insomma, qualche anno fa che era qui al meeting, ci ricordava l'impatto che ha avuto l'incontro col meeting la prima volta, che diceva, vedendo il popolo del meeting, vedendo i volontari, una volta si diceva che esistevano i fanuloni, o gli italiani del non fare. Ecco, non esistono, vedendo voi. E questo è il vero attesamento, questa è la verità di cui provocarci sulla realtà, provocarci sulle domande che ci capitano quotidianamente, come queste domande possono trovare risposte lavorando insieme, condividendo insieme idee, iniziative, senza aver paura del diverso. Allora lì c'è il cambiamento, allora lì c'è la fattività attuativa nel fare le cose, vivendole direttamente noi e vedendo voi, wow, avanti. Lo sviluppo della sharing economy, avete citato più volte il tema del lavoro centrale. Il tema del lavoro come sta trasformando, si trasforma al punto tale che impattano sull'organizzazione conseguentemente. Ci chiede proprio uno sforzo maggiore nel cambiare, nel vedere come finora abbiamo vissuto proprio il modo di collaborare e ci offrono delle nuove opportunità. Stiamo vedendo qualche esempio qui. Approfondiamo questo argomento di queste nuove opportunità con Renzo Noceti, di cui ringrazio ancora una volta per essere qui con noi. Sei socio fondatore di BonBoard, da 25 anni sei uno dei migliori, mi permetto io di sottolineare, insomma, la conoscenza che io ho d'amicizia, di cacciatori di test in Italia. Hai incontrato tantissime persone, hai contribuito fattivamente sull'orientamento e l'impatto delle organizzazioni attraverso le tue competenze. Quindi in qualche modo il lavoro, le organizzazioni, Renzo, le hai viste, le hai toccate con mano in tutti i suoi cambiamenti che da 25 o di più anni la tua esperienza porta. Come perché nell'economia di condivisione che cambiano le organizzazioni, che sono conseguentemente il nostro modo di lavorare insieme, cosa ci porta dietro? Qual è questo cambiamento del lavoro? Cosa vedi tu nel tuo percorso? Aiutaci un po' ad andare a fondo a questa questione.
Sì, Santiago, grazie dell'invito.
Thank you very much for the invitation and thanks for raising such challenging topics. I'd like to try to give my contribution to this debate. In particular, I think it's interesting to focus on what's happening not only when it comes to innovation, but also when it comes to new forms of labor. So sharing economy is not an additional economy, not at all. It's a shift in our existing economy. So it's important to understand which are the changes that are occurring. And sometimes these changes are unstoppable. And somehow relentless. I think new questions are being asked, and it's important to try to give an answer to these questions. So is there going to be sort of more prosperity? Are there going to be more jobs? Are people going to be sort of richer and less busy? Or are these new forms of labor squeezing people? And what is the future of the labor market because of this new sharing economy? So I think that it is important, first of all, to try to understand the new organizational patterns that are occurring and forming, because maybe not all of you are aware of these new forms of labor, and maybe, I mean, you are interested and intrigued somehow by this topic, but maybe you do not quite understand it. It's important to consider the new aspects of sharing economy, because I think that this is something that has to do with all of us. First and foremost, there is a sort of mitigated effect of this sharing economy. The sharing economy, I mean, is a big thing out of Italy. But in Italy, this seems to be not such a big thing. Maybe because we get things at a secondary stage and in a sort of softer way. But again, one thing is to create something new, and one thing is to create something new on a certain at a certain age level. So the reaction of people to these new forms of sharing economy vary according to the age. Second, this, secondary to be considered is the way this sharing economy is seen and considered by people. And I try also to find differences and similarities between and among things. I do not think that the opposite of sharing is being selfish. And I do not think that there is no beatnik aspect in this new economy. But certainly, this economy is not an excluding economy, not at all. This new economy tends to include people and not to exclude people. Last but not least, I want to focus on the historic background. I do not think that phenomena like LetzGo are the very first option. What do I mean by that? That sometimes people create these kinds of businesses because they're pushed to do so by a very long-lasting crisis with deep repercussions. So it's not about seeing a real revolution. I think that somehow these new forms of economy see the day simply because people have no choice, but then they like it and decide to embrace these new behaviors and these new forms of business simply because they like it, they appreciate it. So maybe in the beginning, people use car sharing services because they cannot afford to have their own car, but then they realize that there are huge advantages to be obtained from that, and so then they stick to this kind of behavior. And even though they could afford having a car, they prefer to use carpooling services. So essentially, I mean, these new forms of sharing economy are also supported by new behaviors. And again, we all know far too well the old economic patterns, and sometimes we know that old patterns are more reassuring. But here there are new factors to be considered, and this is something that has been mentioned at all levels by the previous speakers. And believe me when I said that we did not agree on that. So community is the key magic buzzword. So the buzzword is communities. So when it comes to new forms of labor and new forms of labor organization. So the old economy used to try to exclude competitors somehow, and it was about Donald Duck versus Rocker Duck somehow. So it was either or, the goodies and the baddies. Here we have a new concept, the community. And this new concept brings about a whole new world of things and a new kind of complexity. So, I mean, this new way of working, which is community-based, is based on new behaviors, on new attitudes, also with respect to competitors. So there is a new sort of attitude also towards people. So it is perfectly normal to host a stranger in your house. Was it normal 10 years ago? Not at all. Today this is normal and rational. Why? Well, because the cost of a potential bad behavior has huge repercussions. It's so high because one simple bad feedback can generate huge losses and big problems and big troubles. So again, communities are very powerful and they introduce a sort of rating effect. And this is a very democratic phenomenon that puts things on equal foot. So if you read yesterday's Corriere della Sera, so one of the leading Italian newspapers, on page 27 you could read that Starbucks has stated to finance studies about studies carried out by their partners, because I mean the people working at Starbucks form a community. And again, when it comes to sort of estimates and forecasts and outlooks, well, Starbucks has decided to finance and support such studies because Starbucks is a giant carrying out a very basic business. But Starbucks decides now to support with facts and resources new behaviors. So these are brand new, unexpected community-related effects. So Starbucks decides to finance the education of its own staff. This is revolutionary, allow me to say. And again, there is another thing to be considered. There are new functions and roles, new sort of non-core aspects that are becoming more and more important. It goes without saying that the duration of professional life cycles is changing, and also the sort of weight of some brands is sort of being enormously reduced. In the past, there were some schools and universities that seem to guarantee a job in top companies. Well, today this is not the case anymore because everything has a shorter duration, as a sort of smaller impact. And so again, this risks to bring about problems because, I mean, everything is much quicker and ever-changing. So I think that there is a higher level of fragmentation and we are moving unstoppably towards more and more fragmentation. We are becoming more and more dependent on a number of things. And again, the future seems to be less staff-oriented and more community-oriented. And at the same time, I think that communities are the place likely to preserve and promote professional identities of people. So again, new forms of professionalisms are being created by this new sharing economy. It goes without saying that rules are changing as well, and in the past, having a successful career and being a successful professional was based on different rules and standards and criteria. Today, things are getting more and more complex because today, in order to have a brilliant professional career, you need to be an innovator, you need to take risks, to be somehow visionary. And so, again, I mean, there are new things that are becoming more important, and some features that seem to be more successful in the past are not so successful today. And communities like sort of winners and not people that end up having a 0-0 in matches. So again, but when, I mean, losers are somehow forgiven by communities, but they need to show that they did their best to win, even though they did not win. Again, I think that other changes are going to occur, especially when it comes to new aspects related indirectly to these new forms of sharing economy, because communities are also ever-changing entities. Communities have different levels of stratification, organization, different rates of development, and sometimes communities have different structures, and sometimes communities are evolving in different ways. Also, headhunters are changing, and again, so headhunters also have to change their tactics and their strategies, and their job is becoming more and more difficult. And I say it also for democratic purposes, because this is a problem also for headhunters, not only for job seekers.
Su un'esperienza personale, mio papà era in Argentina, ma responsabile di Olivetti. Olivetti, abbiamo qui anche con Gianluca, anche tu hai fatto un'esperienza dentro Olivetti, un'impresa nata in Italia che ancora oggi nei curriculum fattivi.
Today, it is appreciated. Olivetti School paid a lot of attention to its employees. I was in Argentina. I was a kid at that time, and I received presents from Olivetti from Italy, and Olivetti was paying attention to fine little details and to labor. So I understand what happened next. I understand 3M, but this is Italy. So congratulations. So I apologize for that, but you touched upon something that is very dear to me. So you work in selection and recruitment, and you are also working with managers and very distinguished figures. So people that have an excellent career today, and therefore they are important and they are authoritative, but maybe they suffer from the impact of companies that are very innovative. How is the world changing in that? So I think that you gave an answer with the Olivetti example. Now, going back to that world, there really was an Italian managerial school. Here we're not talking about the Renaissance or about 2 centuries ago. Here we're talking about something which still is an echo. And it's quite recent. But at that time, the world was simple. The files, the directories with names and surnames could be written down on paper. The problem is the fact that in some sectors, more advanced sectors, for example, analytics or fintech, if you want to make reference to a market, today, the people holding the top positions in the most important companies in major industries today are at the top of their professional communities. Oh, sorry, I was wrong. They are at the center, not at the top of the community, of their professional communities. So the fact is that the point is that we have to be able to make comparisons. A few months ago, the country manager of one of the major strategic consulting companies, Contri, Italy, told me, and he was somewhat embarrassed. He said to me, there are many people who are sent away in Italy and then they become the top human resource in Apple or in Google. But it's too few. There are too few even to be an exception to the rule. So the point is that we have to be able to make comparisons and you have to be able to accept the assessment. This is what organizations must learn. Because this is going to happen sooner or later. Even today, when you talk about museums, for example, and we talk about hunting foreign assets, foreign human resources, just as if we were looking for the exotic. But we're talking about the artistic heritage Italy, and Italy has 50% of the artistic heritage worldwide. So the point is that in this case, there's just like the Champions League, as if all the championships were merged together. There's no longer regional or national championships. And this is what is new today. And we need to adapt to that. And hopefully, take measures. So, in recent years, in recent months, we've seen enormous changes. For 50 years, Italy stood at a standstill and didn't do anything. But now, by accepting comparison, by accepting the rules of the game, Italy can raise its own voice. So this is the end of an old-style approach, and this is the beginning of a new way to work, to question oneself. I always have to repeat to myself, but who am I? Who am I without judging myself? Thank you. Thank you.
Abbiamo uno squalo tra noi.
We have a shark among us, and he's just been on television. He's a dear friend of ours. He's been here for 4 or 5 times. Thank you very much for being here. So you started with your own startup, your company many years ago, a few years ago, let's say. And in a few years, you've become the main actor in the development of startups, and you proactively contributed to the development of new professions. You were the manager of the Olivetti Group, manager of Lycos, the first search engine worldwide here in Italy. Then you set up your own company, Vitaminic, and you listed it in the stock exchange. Then you stopped for a while, and then you founded dPixel. There is a company meeting young people, meeting the youth. You always meet people, even on television, young people, and you always tell them the truth. They tell you, you have an extraordinary idea. I have an extraordinary idea that want to change the world, and you tell them to go cautious. Today you're also on the internet. You are an advisor to the in the European community. You do crowdfunding. And can the crowdfunding be a driver? So we've heard about rules. We've heard about the changes in the rules and in the legislation. What about crowdfunding? Can it be a driver? Good evening to you all. It's a bit late, and I think that many people are hungry. I think so. Crowdfunding can be very useful, but there's a lot more behind the idea of the sharing economy. And everything is brand new. Sharing economy has been made possible by social networks. Today, on the internet, we put our own face, we put our name and surname, and we receive comments and we make comments. Each one of us has their own reputation, and this reputation can also become a social reputation, as in a reputation on social networks. And this is the value generated by these tools. There's a lot more, because while I was coming here, I thought about John Lash. John Lash showed, even in mathematical terms, that capitalism is based on assumptions that were not fully true. By pursuing your own welfare and your own well-being, and you can reach a welfare for everybody, this is false. This is a false assumption. And we can see that in the fact that there's inequality in richness. And we can also show that through mathematics, from a mathematical point of view, collaboration is an economic tool that works much better than pure competition. Adopting a medium-term approach, and the fact that we are on our planet, we have limited resources, we have water to drink, food to eat, which are limited. This holistic vision of the world and this less selfish approach to the world is the main principle, is the underlying theme, the underlying principle. So, it will take years for us to be aware of that. And we will see a final transformation when we will be fully aware of this principle. I have a direct experience in sharing economy. We have invested our first fund in a company that you invited here and came here because it has ideals that are fully in line with the philosophy of the movement of communion and liberation, as in Sardex. This is the name of the company. Now, very shortly, I will tell you what this company is, what it does, and then I'll show you a very short video, extracts of 2 out of the 4 founding members. Now, very shortly, these are 4 guys, 4 young guys coming from Sardinia. They went to study abroad. They were born in a tiny little village, about 5,000 inhabitants to the north of Cagliari. Very small village in a farming area. And that was the second poorest village all over Italy when we started the company. So they went abroad, they studied abroad, they studied philosophy, economics, marketing. And then they met back again in Serravanna, in this small village. So they met in a bar, they looked at each other's eyes and they said, okay, for thousands of years, we are the first generation ever who has had the possibility to graduate, to go to university. After all, our fathers and grandfathers and ancestors. So what do we do with our university studies? What can we do with that? Because around them, they saw despair. They saw that many people couldn't make ends meet. In this region, in Serramanna, I know many people, and since they have entered Sardex, they can make ends meet. Their families can live well. And this is the victory. So, they couldn't understand why there was this gap between the poverty and the misery around them and all the assets around, as in fields, cars, houses, restaurants. So there were so many assets, but people couldn't have access to them. Hence, Sardex. So they first studied for 4 years what they could do. They started studying history, and they studied in the economies of all the world how people facing a deep economic crisis like this one, how they have reacted. And they have studied through history, and they have tried to find a system that could be resilient to all economic crises, so that the people could enjoy all the assets, all the richness around them. What is a Sardex? So they invented a currency, and they took an experience that was made in Switzerland in the 1930s. Today it is a bank. At the beginning there were 12 entrepreneurs in Zurich. In 1929, year of the crisis, where there were banknotes of 1 million German marks. So currency was no longer valuable at that time. They couldn't do anything with currencies, with money. And so they invented an alternative currency, a parallel economic system, enabling them to exchange goods and services without using French francs. This is just a compensation chamber.
Rispetto a tutti I membri della Camera.
This is just a clearing chamber. And these are the services that are provided to the community. So Sardex is a currency, which is just as equal to the euro. So if this phone costs 300 euro, in Sardex's system it's going to cost 300 Sardex. So Sardex is not a real currency, it's just a fake currency, a way to calculate things. Technically speaking, it is credit given, allocated to small and medium enterprises and to their employees. And that has led to a lot of solidarity. For example, At the beginning, the system was just a business to business, just for companies. For the past 1.5 years, employees can also participate in this system. For example, employees can be paid in Sardex. For example, for companies who were in crisis and had to fire somebody, they had to fire somebody through Sardex, they managed to solve the situations and not to fire anybody. As in, everything is based on deep awareness of what the sharing economy is. And this awareness of sharing economy will enable us to change the basic assumptions of this society. In a system like this one, like Sardex, unemployment is not acceptable. There's just two possibilities if you want to be unemployed. First, you don't want to work. You don't feel like working, so no problem, but then you don't have to complain because you are unemployed. Second, if you feel like working, you can be unemployed in Sardex system because what you offer to the market is not interesting. So nobody is interested in paying you in Sardex for what you have to offer. Maybe you are an artist and you're not understood, and just after your death, you will be appreciated, so you cannot sell your services or goods. Now, there's a couple of videos, and you can hear the remarks of the founding members of Sardex. There's Carlo Mancosu, who is the philosophist of the group. He made a presentation to the parliament. There was a very interesting event on the sharing economy and how to share. And the other person speaking is Gabriele Litera, who is on television and tells very simply but very deeply Sardex. Now here we go with the videos, please. Now, this is Gabriele Litta. So, Serramanna is your village, at the heart of everything. There's about just 10,000 inhabitants who is suffering from very strong crisis. So you started this brilliant initiative, and you made some remarks on that. Yeah. Now, before this initiative, we were not in Serramanna. All of us were scattered around Europe. We were the children that, for the first time, managed to graduate. And at some point, we said to ourselves, okay, we have studied. What do we do with our graduations? And we thought that Sardinia was the place we most love. So if in Sardinia there are no companies that can hire us as marketing officers or through other roles, we wanted to give our expertise not just to one company, but to many thousands of small businesses. 90% of European businesses are small and medium enterprises. So if we close opportunities to these small and medium enterprises, there's no other possibility than crisis and disaster. So we have looked at what other parts of the world have done, and we have tried to adapt solutions at local level. So we have taken example from Switzerland. In Switzerland, there was this project that was promoted with the crisis of 1929. So you studied a model. Yes, we studied a model and clearly over the first 2 years, we received many no's, but at the end of the first 2 years, we've seen that we could do something. And we have created a network among 400 companies. They could buy and sell without using money, bank credit. And where do you want to go? What is the target? Well, it depends on what the future holds in store for us. There are many fields of the economy that are not moving. There's a lot of unexploited potential because there are no possibilities to pay. Well, even if there's no possibility to pay, it's not that the economy has to stop. It's the fact that we have to agree on a different way to pay. Thank you. You've been very clear, just like all the Sardinians. This is self-evident. If I'm hungry and you have a restaurant and I cannot pay you, let's find another way to find an agreement. Because trust and confidence is the underlying principle of the currency. Currency is based on trust and confidence. In Mesopotamia, there were no banknotes. There was bargaining. And at some point, people said, OK, let's have a clearing chamber and let's create an economy. Then at some point he says, well, I'm an expert in marketing. There's not even one company in Sardinia that could pay me for my skills. But I want to work in Sardinia. I want to give my contribution to Sardinia. So let's take 5,000 small and medium enterprises, butchers, milk shops, and I'll put my skills, I'll give my skills, I'll make them available to everyone. This generation has access to a lot of information. And these young people will become super experts. Each one of us will be a super expert on some super specific things. So, for example, I'm an expert in kitesurf because I do it myself. So if you want to have some information on kitesurf, I can give it to you. So this digital technology can help us even more, and I see that with startups. In Gifoni, there's this Gifoni. It's a startup of young people ranging from 16 to 19 years of age. 40 young people coming from different countries of the world, and in autumn they will launch this video game, and they live all around the planet, and they are coordinated by a young Italian guy who is an expert in drivers, and then there's another Italian who is an expert in graphics and 3D, and from home 40 young guys from all over the planet will launch their own video game. If we still have some time, we have a couple of minutes left, so I'm not going to show you the video, but I do recommend you to watch it. There is a video of 1.5 hours on innovation, on sharing economy, connected to this event that was made at the Parliament. You can watch it on YouTube. I just want to highlight something else, and I speak in my capacity as a headhunter here. There is a news that the chief digital officer of one of the major American distribution chains, Walmart, the most important one, came to Bologna to work for Hughes. This sign is consistent with what you have just said. The distance separating from the country and Rimini is shorter than the distance separating Walmart from somebody else. Walmart from a small company that until a few years ago was totally unknown, and that is in Bologna. To conclude, this experience has been and still is very exciting. Now, in Sardinia, there's about 1.2 million credit in Sandex every week. That doesn't create any interests. You don't have to pay interests. And in Sardex, there are no interest rates. Hence, the system is alive and kicking. Then it is quite easy to understand how this system works. It is a clearing chamber, which is not convertible, and so on and so forth. The most difficult thing is to understand why this system, Sardex, works. The only way to understand is to go to Sardinia, meet the members of the community, talk to them, and ask them, why have you joined Sardex? And you will see that the underlying principle is the willingness to work for the community. This economy is based on trust and confidence among members. We basically work on this. And this is a very powerful and resilient driver. There's no financial crisis that can destroy such a system. The only thing that can destroy the system is the lack of trust. If mistrust develops. But there's no other way to destroy such a system because it is very resilient. I've always had this ethical drive. At the beginning, they wanted to create a non-profit organization, but I convinced them to create a startup because they wanted to do some good. They wanted to contribute to their community. But if they wanted to have an impact, the best way to maximize the impact on the community was to set up a startup and to export the system from Sardinia to Italy and to other countries. Hence, they set up a startup with a governance structure, with investors, and with growth stats, in order to have a bigger impact worldwide. And this is a very good example of sharing economy in Italy. So this is a very marginal area also. It is not close to Rome or Milan. It is also far away from an intellectual point of view. It's so much different from any traditional stream of thought, and it's very difficult to explain that to other countries like Americans. You talked about Hughes in Bologna, which is very famous in the fashion market. Now, thanks to our guests, we talked about community, trust among us, trust and confidence in the community. We talked about changes and changes in the way to work. And we also have seen that there are problems in these changes. Where does all this come from? And this is the title of the meeting. We have a big desire starting from our heart. And this is the driving force enabling us to create and set up the foundations of a new world with incredible startups, believing in the youth and believing in marginal areas. Banks are also happy with this. We have a tremendous opportunity, a world that has to be rebuilt. But there's just one condition. As in, this change can be done by all of us all together, but we have to know who we are. We can never forget who we are like people, that we are a community, where we come from. This is the only way we can help ourselves, to embrace what is different from us, to change labor, the way to work. This is the real challenge, and this is the future ahead. Finding ourselves once again with a strong desire that comes straight from our heart. Thank you.